I just want to take a few minutes to start talking about the eco-park system. Just a high-level overview about what we are, what we're not, and why it's important to protect what we've been calling sort of a near urban, or another word for it, peri-urban areas. Little area very close to a city that's not agriculture, basically, natural areas. I'll be talking more about the eco-park system in the next 2 workshops, so this is just a really high-level overview. This shouldn't be a surprise to most folks who grow up in this area. What we're really talking about is this western tip of Lake Ontario. It's got 3 watersheds, the Grindstone, Spencer Creek, and Red Hill Creek, that all flow into Hamilton Harbor, which then flows into Lake Ontario. And it's an important place for ecological connections, with a lot of different landscapes, plants, and animals with them that live in them. And the way landscapes work, landscapes work is that the best way for them to function ecologically is if they're connected. And that's what the eco-park system is all about. We're all about connections, connectivity, figuring out what connects to what. Really trying to make sure there is an ecological connection that remains between Lake Ontario, Hamilton Harbor, and this red swirl, the Niagara Escarpment. The Niagara Escarpment is a very special place. It is a designated UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, which by definition means a place where people live with nature. I think it's pretty stunning. I also think it's pretty incredible that Hamilton, historically been known as an industrial steel town, is just minutes away. You can kind of see it in the background of this photo. It is a place with a wonderful biodiversity of plants. Even after all the centuries of human use, there are a lot of special plants that live in this area. We know about them because of researchers. There's been a lot of them, but I'll focus on RBG for a second. A lot of RBG's story is of botanists cataloging and exploring RBG properties, seeing what's out there. One of the most recent studies we have suggests that there is over a quarter of Canada's plant life on RBG property alone. Again, that's pretty remarkable, not just for the number of species, but for the special species that are in this area. One is called the red mulberry. It's a species at risk, and it's Canada's most endangered tree. There's about, I think, 600 or so left across the country. They've been damaged by habitat loss and the introduction through a hybridization process of something called white mulberry. There's about 200 in our area that run along the escarpment on not only RBG property, but a few other partner eco-park system partners as well. This little tiny fella is called the few-flowered clubrush. It's a little sedge, sometimes called the bashful bulrush. In Canada, it can only be found in Cootes Paradise Marsh. There used to be a few at Rouge National Park, just sort of east of Toronto, but it hasn't been seen there in over a decade. One of RBG's key restoration projects is working with different agencies to figure out and understand this plant. What makes it tick? What makes it stay? What are some of its key issues? So I like the red mulberry and the bashful bulrush. I think they're an example of a very precious plants that are located in our urban area. Zooming out of Cootes Paradise Marsh and sort of the eco-park system study area. Sorry, my cat has seen another cat and it's starting to attack it. So if I look that way, there's a fight happening. So Cootes Paradise and the eco-park system study area is this red square shape. We zoom out to southern Ontario. We have to acknowledge that it's a densely populated and rapidly urbanizing area. We've got a population on the rise. We've got about 15 million people scheduled to be living in this area by 2051. And if COVID's shown us anything, it's that access to nature within a walking distance is really important for physical, mental health, but also as landowners, reducing flood risk, making neighborhoods cooler. We need it more than ever. We can't get away from urbanization. People need a place to live. And that's kind of the middle area that the eco park system is trying to work out, trying to find what works best between urban and natural areas to figure out good ways to survive and live with plants and wildlife, our neighbors. Oh, they're going at it. Anyway, so this green area is a bit deceiving because it does make it seem like there's a lot, but a lot of this actually is recovered from previous use. And today we've got a lot of pressures from our species, from humans. Fragmentation, the introduction of invasive species, things like road ecology, and the big honking one, climate change. All I'm really trying to say is that our little neck of the woods, the head of the lake, is really, really special. Fun fact, it's the last place along Lake Ontario that connects the Escarpment and Lake Ontario watersheds that doesn't have a highway or other significant urban development running through it. I'm specifically talking about Cootes Paradise, going up through Dundas, a place called Pleasant View, up to the Escarpment. And we've known a lot about it for a long time. There's a strong history of collaboration to protect these pockets of natural areas going back to the 1900s. RBG in the early 1900s coming together to protect Cootes Paradise Marsh. Before that, what is now the Hamilton Naturalist Club, working hard to designate Cootes Paradise Marsh as a bird sanctuary. In the 1950s, conservation authorities came into the picture. 70s and 80s, and even today, the Hamilton Harbor Remedial Action Plan, a group of a lot of different organizations, stakeholders around our communities coming together to essentially clean up Hamilton Harbor. A lot of these groups joined up and became the eco park system. In 2013, 9 agencies, including the Bruce Trail Conservancy, City of Burlington, Conservation Halton, Halton Region, City of Hamilton, Hamilton Conservation Authority, Hamilton Naturalist Club, McMaster University, of course, RBG, came together and decided that we want to be able to cooperate and work together to protect those natural green spaces between Hamilton Harbor and the Niagara Escarpment. This slide keyword here is cooperation. Want to make sure these agencies who are landowners in the area have natural areas are working together. We have a common goal. We want to protect, restore, and connect them. So let's do it. A lot of our work involves securing ecological corridors, a lot of local stewardship projects, awareness raising, and encouraging appropriate use. We do land securement as well. If there are properties available, try and snag them. Funding and restoration for stewardship and new approaches. Research is a big piece of our work as well. What we're not is a group that's trying to get regulatory powers over partner agencies. They can do whatever they want on their properties. They own their properties, or private landowners. That's not our mission. That's not our value or our goal. We're there filling the grout, if that's another way of looking at the eco park system. We work hard to find the gaps between partner agencies and interested landowners to see what we can do together. It's a gap filling exercise. So since 2013, we've done quite a bit of work. I'll be highlighting a lot of this throughout the remaining 2 workshops, but just really quickly, healthy ecosystems obviously is a focus of ours. A lot of stewardship projects which you'll be learning about. Human experience is a key one, making sure people who live here actually have access to these natural areas. An event like this is a really good example. We want to highlight places like Hidden Valley Park and show people that they're there, and there's really great biodiversity, plants and animals that you can experience. We love being innovative and looking at new ways of protecting and maintaining natural areas in and around urban areas. One exciting one that we'll be talking about next week is our wildlife corridor project. Partnerships is huge, not only between our partners, but with other stakeholders, other groups. We do a lot of work on private landowners as well. So that's our jam as well. And overall, we've raised just over $10 million for our programming and events since about 2013. Anyway, that's the eco park system. I'll talk about it a bit more after over the next couple of weeks. But at this point, I'll hand it off to Nadia, who will talk about Plant ID 101.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm delighted to be here with you and to share with you a presentation on identifying plants. Now, let me get this started. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. There we go. And I just want to make sure, Tom, can you let me know if you can see my cursor moving across the screen?
I can see it.
You can see it? Okay, great. Perfect. Okay, I would like to start with, just a sec. Okay, there we go. I would like to start with discussing some of the tools that we use for identifying plants. My favorite tool is in my pocket all the time, except for when I forgot it at home again. It's my phone. I have data on my phone, and so I can always access the Go Botany website. I will, that's the image on the top up here. And I will, throughout this presentation, show you how to use the Go Botany website for identifying a plant. However, if you're the kind of person who doesn't want to have your data-enabled phone with you to identify plants and you would prefer to have a classic field guide, I highly recommend the Newcomb's Wildflower Guide. It covers Eastern North America, and the way that it's set out to explain how to get to the plant that you're looking for is really easy and straightforward, and it's great. There are others. Lone Pine publishes very many field guides, but it has a few good ones for Southern Ontario, including one for some for wildflowers. There's one that's Wildflowers of Southern Ontario specifically. And there's one that's the Trees of Ontario. That one is currently out of print. And so if you find it at a used bookstore, grab it. Otherwise, there is the Northern Forest Atlas that published woody plants of the Northern Forest. This one is New England centered, but it applies very well to Southern Ontario. So that one is also great. The Royal Ontario Museum also publishes field guides. They have one on wildflowers, and they are working on one on trees. You might also like to have a hand lens with you. 10 times or 20 times magnification hand lens is all you need. You can get them online. You can get them for as little as $5, and those $5 hand lenses are just fine. They go up to several $100s. Please don't go spending several $100s on a hand lens. I like one with an LED light because when you're in the forest under dense canopy, even if it's a sunny day, it's a little dark under there, and it's sometimes difficult to see the tiny little details that you might like to see. Okay, so once you've got the tools, you need to have some botany words. And all of those tools that I just mentioned, all the field guides and the website that I just mentioned will teach you these words. What I've got here is a few scans of a few pages from Newcomb's Wildflower Guide. At the very beginning of the book, they have a section on basic terms where they go over the terms that they use throughout the field guide and show you pictures and explain them. And there's a glossary. Go Botany also has a glossary in it. There are so many terms in their glossary that they have it classified by categories, pages of the letter of the alphabet. And one of the really lovely things about this one is whenever you see a word that's in green underlined with a dashed line, If you hover your cursor over it, a picture, an illustration comes up showing you what that is, along with the text definition. You will need to know some words to describe leaves. You'll need to know about what the leaf arrangement is, whether it's alternate or opposite or whorled. You'll need to know if you're looking at a leaf that is simple or compound. You might have learned the word compound leaf as divided leaf. It's the same thing. You'll need to be able to describe whether the margins or the edges of your leaf are entire, toothed, or lobed, and how they are entire, toothed, or lobed. And to help with learning a little bit of this terminology, I have a video I'd like to share with you. It's a video that my team created over the summer as part of a self-guided workshop for learning how to identify trees by their leaves. All right, so something I'd like to point out, I hope that video was helpful, and something I would like to point out about it is I mentioned that you look for a bud along a twig or a stem to figure out where the leaf begins to help you know if it's a compound leaf or a simple leaf. That only applies to woody species, trees, shrubs, woody vines. You won't see that in herbaceous plants. And herbaceous plants are plants that will that are all soft above ground, no woody parts to it, and they die back to the ground in the winter. However, with those plants, it's usually pretty obvious when you're looking at a compound leaf versus a simple leaf. And if when you're identifying through any of the tools that I show you here or anything else that you use, if you're having trouble getting to the right species and you weren't sure if what you were looking at was a simple leaf or a lobed leaf, just do it in one way as though it's one kind of leaf, and if it doesn't work, go back and do it the other way. Okay, we're going to go over flower words very quickly. These are words that you would have learned in your high school biology class, but sometimes that's a long time ago. So let's look at the typical parts of a flower, beginning at the bottom of the flower. The stalk that the flower is attached to, and there isn't always one, but if there is one, there are flowers have their own words for their stalks. They're called pedicels or peduncles, depending on the kind of flower and the situation. Above the stalk, you have the section where all of the other flower parts attach, and that's called the receptacle. The outer layer attached to the receptacle are the sepals. Those are the ones that look like little green petals. And all the sepals together, the whole set, is called the calyx. Next, you have the petals, and they're always in this order. And the petals are usually the colored ones, and all together, the whole set is called the corolla. Moving inwards, you next have the reproductive parts that produce and release the pollen, and those are the stamens. The anther is the part where the flower releases the pollen, and the anther is usually attached to a filament to the receptacle. And the centermost part of the flower is the pistil. At the very bottom, you have the ovary, in which there are the ovules that become the seeds. And there's usually a stalk called the style that leads to the stigma, which is the sticky part that catches the pollen. Okay, now that we've got a little bit of terminology down, let's learn how to use Go Botany. There's the URL for Go Botany here in green. And if you would like to, you can pull it up on your phone and follow along as we will practice identifying a plant with it. Don't worry, you don't have to do that. It's all, I've screenshotted the whole process so that you can see it. Go Botany is a plant identification website, and it has many resources in it. The resources that are of interest to us are the keys. I'll describe what that is shortly. The glossary, the thousands of plant photographs, and the descriptions for 3,500 plants. Again, Go Botany is New England based, but it works for us just fine. There will be plants there that we don't have, and there will be plants that we have that they don't. If you are looking for other geographies, I guess, where there's a good overlap in plants, there's Michigan, where our flora is very much a mix between what's in New England and what's in Michigan, with a lot of overlap to both. So you can use field guides from any of those places, and they're going to work very well for us. Okay, let's talk about keys. A key is a group of questions that, as you answer, brings you closer and closer to the identification of your plant until you get there. There are two kinds of keys, both of them present in Go Botany. There are interactive keys and dichotomous keys. Interactive keys is many questions, and each question will ask you about the characteristics of the plant that you're looking at. You choose which questions you want to answer in an interactive key. And every time you answer a question, it narrows down the number of possible plants. In Go Botany, there are two interactive keys. One is called the simple key, and you can see it in the bar up on top. I'm circling simple key here. A little bit further on is full key. They work exactly the same way. The only difference is the full key has all 3,500 plants that are included in Go Botany. In the simple key, they narrowed it down to the 1,200 most common plants. So I would suggest start with the simple key. If you can't get to the plant that you're looking at with a simple key, you can try the full key. Maybe it's there. The dichotomous key, you don't choose which questions you answer. You always have a set of two questions, and you have to choose which one best describes the plant you're looking at. And then what you choose will lead you to another set of two questions, which will lead you to another set of two questions, and so on until you get to your plant. We're going to practice by identifying this plant. I went out to RBG and parked by Cherry Hill Gate and took a short walk down the trail and took pictures of a few plants and decided this is the one that we're going to identify together. So this plant has a yellow flower, which has an irregular shape. We'll get to that shortly. It has a spur. The spur is this bit, sticks out the back. The leaves are arranged in an alternate pattern along the stem. And they are simple, and they have teeth on their margins. And another character that I thought was really cool is if you look at the stem of the plant, it's covered in this white waxy substance that if you rub it with your finger, it rubs off. So with those characters, let's see where we go. All right, so the first thing that Simple Key asks you is what category your plant fits in. Is it a woody plant, an aquatic plant, a grass-like plant, orchids and related plants? Is it a fern, or is it all other flowering non-woody plants? And if you're not sure what characterizes each one of these groups, they put a definition there for you, a quick summary definition up on top, and then it lays out the key characteristics for them. And it also gives you, in the exceptions, a few hints to know whether what you're looking at is actually in this group. So our plant here is part of the all other flowering non-woody plants. So I would click, my plant is in this group, and then it would take me to another set of, oops, I forgot. In the pictures that I showed you here, I'm actually not really sure if it's in these other, I know it's not a grass or fern or an orchid, but could it be aquatic? I didn't show you the habitat in these pictures, and I didn't show you enough of the plant to know if it's woody. So I also took a picture of the habitat. So if you're taking pictures to send to people to help you identify a plant, make sure you get all of this, get the habitat and as many characters of the plant as you can, and make sure your pictures are in focus. So we see that it's in a terrestrial habitat, it's not in water, and it's down low to the ground. There are woody trees here. It's obviously not a tree, and there's nothing indicating that it would be a shrub to me. If it were, I'd better take a picture of the woody twigs or the bark so that I know. So this is how we know that it is in the all other flowering non-woody plants category. Once you go in there, it asks you to further categorize it. So is it something that's in the daisies, goldenrods, and other asters? And if you're not sure what makes that, they give you the definition again. Is it in other herbaceous flowering plants with alternate leaves? I think that's what we've got. But always check all your options before you pick one. Is it in other herbaceous flowering plants with opposite whorled or no leaves? It is definitely not that. It's the one with alternate leaves. So you click the button that says my plant is in this subgroup. And it takes you to, surprise, more questions. But at this point, it also tells you, well, you have 291 possible matches. So if you really want to scroll through that many pictures, I guess you can do it. But much better is to answer the questions that it provides here. To get to the questions, just hit continue. And it takes you here. The first question up on top is the habitat. And it's an easy question. It's just, is it aquatic? Is it terrestrial? Or does it grow in wetlands? The difference between aquatic and wetlands is aquatic plants are submerged. Wetland plants grow out of the water. It is terrestrial, so I choose terrestrial, and I can see here that it's narrowing it down to 276 possible plants. And I hit apply selection. The next question would be, which New England state is it in? It doesn't apply to me, so I'm going to choose to not answer that question. I'll go to the next one. What's the leaf type? And then when you click that, it gives you pictures and definitions again, which is so kind. So is the leaf blade divided into smaller leaflets? It's not. We already decided that is a simple leaf, so we select that option and apply the selection, which is going to take me down to 188 possibilities. I'm going to answer more questions. I'm going to answer what's the flower petal color, because that's really easy. It's yellow, and it takes me down to 59 plants. Apply selection there. And the next question is, what are the leaf blade edges? Again, another one that's really easy to answer for this plant. And if you forgot, it gives you the definitions and pictures. The edge of our leaf has teeth. Apply that selection. We're down to 35 plants. Okay. So the next question is about flower symmetry. And this is where earlier I said it's an irregular flower, and that I would describe later what that means. So when we're talking about flower symmetry, there's either more than two ways to draw a line through the flower and still get a mirror image. I could draw it this way, I could draw it this way. I'm going to get a mirror image wherever I draw my line. But with a flower like this, there's only one way where I could draw a line and then have a mirror image. And that is what is an irregular flower. And there's a whole bunch of words for describing the same thing. In this particular manual, they call it a bilaterally symmetrical flower. So we'll choose this one. That takes us down to 7 matching species. That's exciting. All right, at this point, I could just look at the pictures and pretty easily get to what my plant is, but I'm having so much fun answering questions. I want to answer more. So I'm going to say, get me more questions. And when I do that, hang on, I'll go back here. Here's where you do get more questions when you got to the bottom of what's available there that you want to answer. Get more questions, and then it gives you categories. I'm thinking about that white waxy coating on the stem, and I really want it to ask me something about it. So I'm going to click the stem, shoot, and branch category, hit get questions. And the questions, the additional questions that show up at the bottom of the column full of questions. The first one is on stem succulents. I don't really want to answer that, so I won't. The plant height, well, I technically could, but I don't want to answer that either. But what about stem bloom? What is bloom? If you hover over that word, because green has a dashed line under it, the definition comes up along with a photograph of it. And this is exactly what I was looking at on the stem of the plant I'm looking at. It's a white or white blue powdery or waxy coating on a surface that can be rubbed away. Excellent. I want to answer that question. So I'll click it. And I will say my stem has a powdery or waxy film on it that can be rubbed away. And that should take me down to 2 plants when I apply selection, but for some weird reason, it still gives me 4 matching species. That's okay, even though it's twice as many. 4 pictures are pretty easy to look through. It is really clear that what we're looking at is Impatiens pallida, or pale touch me not. And the picture I showed you of the flower earlier was from the side. I also took one from the front, and that matches that very, very well. You notice here it says show photos of flowers. If you click on that, it will give you other things you can look at. It will show you pictures of fruits, leaves, the plant form, and the stems. So you can look at pictures, pictures of other parts of the plant than what was showing up when you opened the website. When you click on the pale touch me not, it will, also called pale jewelweed, it will bring up a summary of the plant, and you can click through some pictures and read the summary. But if you want to know more, you hit the button that says full profile. And it looks like this. It gives you a bar that you can scroll through to see all the different kinds of pictures. It will tell you the common names. It has a range, 2 range maps on the left-hand side. The first one is for New England, and the second one at the bottom is for North America, which is really for the USA. But at the very top of it, you get some Canadian provinces, and you get an idea of whether it's present in Ontario. If the range map is colored green, that means it is native to here. If it's purple, that means it's an introduced species. It'll give you some facts about the plant, and if you scroll down, it will tell you more about the habitat and the plant description. And there's even along the side sometimes a little section of what you can easily confuse this plant with, and that is one of the most useful parts of this particular key, in my opinion. I appreciate that part quite a lot. So you can bring your phone with you and use GoBotany to identify the plants that you see on your walk right on the spot. If you don't want to do that, you want to identify it at home or get somebody to help you with it, take pictures. Make sure you get pictures of the form of the plant, which I've got over here. I can see that it's low down and it kind of covers the ground in a carpet. I've got pictures of the flower from more than one angle. I can see the color, I can see the symmetry. If it was a more regular kind of flower, I would be able to count the number of petals or parts. You don't have to bring a ruler out with you to capture the size. Just use your hand or for scale, or if it's something big like a tree or shrub, get somebody to stand next to it, put your dog next to it, and tell them to sit and take a picture. Grab pictures of the fruits if they're there. The leaves, I like to take the top side and back side of the leaf. Sometimes they show you different information. The stem and the habitat and any features that you think might help you ID the plant, like that white waxy coating. Please take only pictures, take nothing else. We live in a very urban environment that is subject to so many pressures. We all need to do our part to help conserve these plants and their habitats. Adam will tell you more about this shortly. So while I was on the trail, I took a few pictures of more plants that I would like to show you, some of them because I want you to be able to recognize poison ivy all year long. This is what it looks like right now. And I have, after this, there's a few more plants that you will see if you go for a walk right now. Poison ivy. You've heard leaves of 3, let it be. So here on the left, we have a leaf. And the leaves of 3 part refers to the 3 leaflets of the leaf. Now, there are lots of plants that have 3 compound leaves of 3 leaflets. How do you know poison ivy from all the other ones? If you look at the margins of the poison ivy leaflet, you'll see that it is irregularly toothed. So look at this leaf here. There's a big tooth down here. I'd almost even call it a lobe. And then you go up here, there's more big teeth and they get smaller. And then you have small teeth on this side. And then you have no teeth at all right here. And that is very characteristic of poison ivy. Each leaflet has its own little stalk here. And if you look in this picture, you can see it's kind of carpeting the ground. It is woody. The woody parts do persist above ground in the winter. And yeah, you can get a rash from touching it. So if you can't see it very well in this picture, but if you were to see this and you were to bend down and take a look at how the leaves come off the stems, you would see that they're arranged in an alternate pattern. Sometimes poison ivy grows looking like this. It's kind of like a carpet. Sometimes it grows as a nice sturdy woody vine winding its way up the tree. Sometimes it grows looking more like a shrub. So that's poison ivy. Get a good image of it in your mind and be careful. You will see it when you go out walking. Many of the other plants that you'll see flowering right now are in the sunflower family or the aster family. Like this woodland sunflower here. This is also from the Cherry Hill parking lot right by Cherry Hill Gate. And the woodland sunflower is about 5 feet tall. It grows in woodlands on edges of forests where there's a little bit of light, oftentimes along trails, lucky for us, and in gaps in the forest where some light comes through. If you look closer, you will see that it has 2 leaves coming out opposite one another along the stem here. If you were to touch those leaves, they feel very rough. They're pretty cool. And this is about the size of the woodland sunflower flower head. You would see the blue-stemmed goldenrod, and we tend to think of goldenrods as the Canada goldenrod, which is what we see on roadsides or growing abundantly in fields. But we have about 30 different kinds of goldenrods in Ontario, and they can look. There's a lot of diversity in what they look like. This particular goldenrod this one was about 2 feet tall. It'll grow between 1 and 3 feet tall. And it has these clusters, small clusters of little yellow goldenrod flowers growing from the axils of the leaves. The axil of the leaf is where the leaf meets the stem, all the way along the stem. And I'd like to point out also that no goldenrods cause hay fever. What's causing the hay fever is ragweed. It's a very inconspicuously flowering plant. It has these tiny little green flowers. Nobody even notices it's flowering, but it grows alongside the goldenrods. So when we feel itchy noses and we're beside a goldenrod and we see that, we blame the goldenrod. However, goldenrod pollen is so thick and heavy that it can't be carried along the wind. It would just fall down to the ground. It's an insect pollinated plant. Next, you will see the large leaved aster. You will first notice these pretty aster flowers here. They are white to purple, and they grow in clusters, pretty wide, loose clusters. And then you might notice leaves that look like hearts with a very long tip. And you might notice that there's a lot of them. If you can see in this picture, there are many right here, and they are all connected underground. And they all grow in a little basal rosette, all these leaves coming from the ground until it decides it's going to flower, at which point it sends up this shoot with this lovely cluster of aster flowers up on top. And that was the last one of the plants that I am going to share with you today. I hope that you go for a walk and see all these plants. And I really hope that you learned a little bit of terminology and enjoyed learning about Go Botany. And I hope that you will try using it. It is a lot of fun. I'm going to stop. Oops, that's not what I wanted. I'm going to stop share. There we go. And here I am again. And I am now going to pass the mic to Adam.
Thank you, Nadia. I'm just going to pull up my presentation here. There we go. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit. First of all, my name is Adam Brylowski. I am the manager of conservation and trail at the Bruce Trail Conservancy. And I'm going to talk about trail etiquette, which is rather important because the way that you're going to get to these plants that you're looking at is generally going to be through a trail. So let's begin. So a little bit about the Bruce Trail Conservancy first. So we do manage the Bruce Trail, which goes from Niagara, Queens to Niagara to Tobermory. It's about 900 kilometers long. Our mission is preserving a ribbon of wilderness for everyone forever. And that's it speaks to the fact that we're not only administering the Bruce Trail and monitoring it and maintaining it, we're also actively acquiring land along the Niagara Escarpment to protect a conservation corridor that contains a public footpath. And the inception of the Bruce Trail was a bunch of people from the Hamilton Naturalist Club that decided that the Niagara Escarpment needed to be protected, and the best way to do that was to give people free public access to it. So that's what we're continuing on with. And we're so proud to be doing our mission. Right now, during times of COVID, we've actually noticed that there's a lot more people going out and using the Bruce Trail. And that's fantastic. That's what we want. That's what it was created for. But there are certain rules that we need to remind people of in order to use proper etiquette along the Bruce Trail. So let's talk about trail etiquette. What is it? Well, trail etiquette is a code of behavior among trail users that promotes respect. Respect for fellow trail users, landowners, and the environment. Especially now during days of COVID, people are concerned about social distancing, so it's always important to respect other people on the trail and not affect their experience as well. And that goes for the same for the owners of the land that trails cross. It's always important to recognize that the trail is there for a particular reason. And with the Bruce Trail, we have a good percentage of the trail that goes over private land, courtesy of the landowner. We ask them if we can put the trail there, and they say yes, or they say no. And it's these people that really are the heroes, some of the heroes of the Bruce Trail, and allow public access through their land. So trail etiquette is incredibly important. Why do we follow trail etiquette? Again, to ensure a positive experience for everybody that's there, to keep the trail well maintained, to maintain trail access. And as I mentioned just a second ago, we have a lot of private landowners allowing the Bruce Trail there. And if they start finding that people aren't necessarily following the trail anymore and are trespassing onto their property, which happens all the time, then we're at risk of being thrown off, the trail itself being thrown off of their property. And then there's a continuity issue. What we generally have to do is route the trail on a road. So following or not following the rules, rather, is something that could jeopardize the experiences of everybody that's meant to use the Bruce Trail. Safety is also a massive concern, especially with our trail, the Bruce Trail, because it follows a cliff. It's meant to follow the Niagara Escarpment, which in some places is 100 feet high. And if not the escarpment face itself, there's a number of crevices and boulders and areas that could be potentially dangerous if you were to fall into them. And it's very important to stay on the trail, on a marked trail, so that you don't go off and you don't hurt yourself. And of course, there's also sensitive plants that follow the trail. Our mandate is to place a trail in the least ecologically damaging manner. So we're always looking for species at risk, sensitive species, and trying to put the trail as far away as we can so it's got the lightest footprint on the land. And also wildlife. The trail does go through breeding areas for birds and for mammals. So staying on the trail will prevent disturbing wildlife, birds that nest on the ground. There's a number of them. You don't want to disturb them. It might flush them, it might spook them. And in that case, sometimes they may not return to the nest. So Being respectful of everything in your surroundings is incredibly important while you're using the trail. Some of the basics. First of all, plan ahead and prepare. One thing that we're noticing a lot is that people are parking along the side of roads illegally many times, and that generally seems to be because they don't have a backup plan. So if you are planning on going quite a distance to go hiking, it's a great idea to have more than one destination in mind so that you're not thrown off guard and just say, oh, forget it, I'm just going to park here. Seems like everybody else is doing it. Because again, that sort of, it ruins the experience by creating illegal activities. And we hear from it from municipalities who are trying to enforce safety regulations. Stay on the trail and obey signage. Signage is a massive part of trails. Following blazes, what we use for the Bruce Trail is it's called a blaze. It's a white rectangle, and that connotes the main Bruce Trail. And a baby blue rectangle means it's a side trail. So following these blazes will make sure that you get wherever you're going in the right direction. Whereas going off trail, there's no real way to know where you're going to be going. Respect landowners and property. As I mentioned, it's not only public land that's the trails are on, but also private land. Pack out your trash. That's a massive, massive, important part of using trails. The last thing you want to see when you're walking through a beautiful forest is trash along the side of it. One of my least favorite things is finding dog poop bags that have been tied up with poop in them, left on the ground. Incredibly disrespectful and horrible for the environment. So leave nature as you found it. And also, if you're going to be walking with a pet, assuming it's a dog, manage your pet. Make sure that your dog stays on a leash. So you stay on the trail to protect wildlife. As I mentioned earlier, what we do on our trail, the Bruce Trail, is look at the trail route in advance and ensure that it does not infringe on any sensitive habitats or critical habitat for certain species and species at risk. So what we try to do is create, no matter what happens, a footpath is going to compact the earth and it's going to trample vegetation. So what we do is try to concentrate that disturbance in a small area and leave the rest for nature. So we call it controlled access to the Niagara Escarpment. We want everyone to be controlled, but still have access to it. Remember that many plants and animals could be hiding right beneath your feet. Myself, I've accidentally stepped on a rattlesnake once, and I almost stepped on a whippoorwill nest, which they nest on the ground. That's while I was off trail doing ecological surveying work. But there's critters around, and you could very easily disturb or even kill them. Leave nature as you found it to protect habitat. When you're in nature, you're in others' homes, so act like a house guest. We are in the home of all the animals that live in the natural world. So please be mindful of that and clean up after yourself. Don't steal from your hosts, meaning do not poach anything along the Bruce Trail. There are certain plants that are very commonly poached, like ginseng, for example. Those plants can grow up to 40 years old before they're mature. And it's very sad to see when a population of ginseng goes missing because it's been poached and sold on the black market. Avoid excessive noise, and this is especially important during breeding bird season. You don't want to flush out any birds that are sitting on their nest. So keeping quiet and just being respectful is very, very important. So about pets, I mentioned it's really, really important to keep your dog on a leash when you're walking along a trail. I know that it's not as fun for the dog, but there are off-leash dog parks that you can go to. And letting your dog off leash can actually have negative consequences for local wildlife species. Birds, like I said, ground nesting birds, they could be flushed from their nest and the dog could injure them or injure the eggs that they're incubating. So respect no dog zones, keep your pets on a leash, and clean up after your pet, which means bringing that poop bag out with you. One other thing I should mention on the Bruce Trail is that we do have areas where the trail passes through private property that has cows on it, or horses, or donkeys, and these landowners have asked us to ensure that we enforce dogs on leash policies so that they don't have their animals spooked as well. So while you're walking along the trail, the best place to look for plants are areas with a variety of habitats. So places that have wetlands, forests, fields, open water, such as ponds or lakes, are all great ideas for poking around and trying to identify plants. And in the Cootes to Escarpment area, there's a couple places that I can mention that I've seen some really interesting plants. One of them is along Grindstone Creek in Waterdown. So Grindstone Creek is a deep river valley with really steep slopes. But if you're attentive, you can find some interesting species along these slopes. Eastern flowering dogwood is a species at risk. And you can see the flowers in the bottom right corner of the screen. And we find that in somewhat abundance along Grindstone Creek. You can see it flowering in early spring. It's a beautiful, beautiful little shrubby tree. American chestnut, unfortunately, most of these trees have been completely wiped out by a blight. And there are still some sprouts that pop up, which are incredibly exciting for someone who's interested in plant identification or botany. So there's a couple of those along Grindstone Creek. And sassafras trees, which are trees that have a bit of a mitten leaf. And there's something that you don't really see typically much farther than Hamilton or Toronto in Southern Ontario. And the second one I'll mention is Fisher's Pond, which is an acquisition that the Bruce Trail Conservancy did about 3 years ago. And it's got mature forest on it, open water in the form of Fisher's Pond, a big man-made pond. There's wetland on it as well, riparian areas, successional forest and meadow. And on this property, you're going to see a whole bunch of sedges and asters, buttonbush, which is the bottom right corner. It's a wetland plant, a wetland shrub that creates these really interesting flowers and seeds. The butternut, which is a tree that's endangered because of a blight that's killing it. It's a fungal disease. And it's somewhat common of a tree, but it may not be around for that much longer. And black oak, which likes sandy soils. So I hope that everyone learned something about trail etiquette today. And I wish you all the best in going out and identifying plants along any trail in the Cootes to Escarpment system. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks, Adam, and thank you, Nadia. And thank you all for sticking around and listening.